Hello and welcome to the Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, the Donald is back. Former President Trump's Make America Great flame burns bright at the Conservative Political Action Conference, or C-PAC, in Florida. He's returned to the spotlight, giving his first major speech since losing the presidency to Joe Biden and hinting at plans for a political comeback as he attempts to consolidate his influence and reassert control over the Republican Party. We'll get reaction and assessment from someone who was there with him as he delivered his message in Florida in a moment. And later, a Nigerian in New York City running as a candidate for city council in the 21st district. He's one of a new breed of first-generation immigrants who've overcome numerous obstacles and defied the odds to get to that podium and to enter American politics, an arena that's only now slowly beginning to reflect the diversity of the general population, and even then, only in progressive urban centers. We'll speak to George Onora, New York City Council candidate and a Democrat, coming up. Now, Donald Trump ceased to be US president some 40 days ago, but for millions of Republicans, he does still rather appear to be their commander-in-chief. And the Conservative Political Action Conference, or C-PAC, is where many of them came to show their very vocal support. They even welcomed a golden effigy of the former president as it was being wheeled into the conference center in Orlando, Florida. Mr. Trump gave the most anticipated speech to his fans since the storming of the Capitol building by some of his supporters almost 2 months ago. Here's a sample of what he said at that conference.
Thank you very much. And C-PAC, do you miss me yet? Do you miss me? A lot of things going on. To so many wonderful friends, conservatives, and fellow citizens in this room and all across our country, I stand before you today to declare that the incredible journey we've begun together. We went through a journey like nobody else. There's never been a journey like it. There's never been a journey so successful. We began it together 4 years ago, and it is far from being over. We're not starting new parties. You know, they kept saying, he's going to start a brand new party. We have the Republican Party. It's going to unite and be stronger than ever before. I am not starting a new party.
Donald Trump. Well, for his review of President Trump's speech and the C-PAC convention, let's speak now to Richard T. Hines, President and CEO of RTH Consulting, which specializes in domestic government procurement and international relations. Mr. Hines is one of those Republican operators who helped Donald Trump run his 2016 campaign at all levels and is considered to be a Trump loyalist. And Mr. Hines joins me now from Florida, where he's been attending that C-PAC conference. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, he arrived more than an hour and 10 minutes late, but boy did he play to the gallery, and he certainly, was given an enthusiastic reception, wasn't he?
It was phenomenal. President Trump has a habit of arriving late, and Americans are less patient than Nigerians in waiting, but they did not mind the wait. So that tells you a lot right there.
And I think the biggest applause he got was arguably when he said he would possibly beat the Democrats in a presidential race for the third time, implying that he might run for president again in 2024, and also implying that he actually won last year, something he's been saying for a while now, but without a scintilla of evidence to back it up.
Well, I would disagree with you there. There have been numerous court challenges. Few, if any, of those court challenges have resolved the merits of the complaints. They've all been dismissed on technicalities, usually based on the standing of the individual bringing the suit. By far, I'm a former member of the House of Representatives in my state, so by far the more important case was brought by, and he made reference to this in his speech, 20 states, led by the state of Texas, a very large state. My state of South Carolina was one of those states, went to the U.S. Supreme Court and said, the Constitution of the United States says that the legislature has to certify these votes. Now, the votes in question have to do with the 42% of all the votes that were received in the mail. Republicans and the Trump supporters maintained they were tampered with. For example, in one state, there were 86,000 consecutive votes for Biden. Well, statistically, that's very highly improbable that that would happen. And the court didn't hear the case based on a technicality. But clearly, the Constitution of the United States, which in many ways has been imitated in Nigeria, indicated that the legislature, of which I was once a member, has to certify that vote. And these legislatures didn't certify the vote. Sometimes a friendly Democrat judge certified the vote. Sometimes a bureaucrat certified the vote. But the governing body of that state, particularly the 6 battleground states, the legislature didn't certify the votes. And that President Trump maintained, and his supporters, of which I am one, maintained that that's a violation of the Constitution of the United States. So, as you know, it's a very close election. And the first month in office with President Biden has been extremely controversial. President Trump made a big point out of attacking Biden on this gender identity, letting men, even who alter themselves physically, transvestites or trans, as they say, compete with women in women's sports. This whole idea of social revolution is repellent to most traditional Americans, as it would be in Nigeria, you can imagine. So that's one of the many points he brought out. But the idea that his complaints about election irregularities don't have a scintilla of evidence is not true. That evidence that they do have, and it's a vast amount of evidence, was not heard in the courts. And of course, there are attempts still being made to present that evidence. But more important than that would be to prevent any repetition of the voting fraud which may have occurred. And he emphasized that strongly in his speech.
I would think there'd be greater eagerness not to replicate the sort of thing that we saw on January the 6th on Capitol Hill. But I mean, the former National Security Advisor, who is himself quite a conservative Republican, John Bolton, said when he saw Mr. Trump giving a speech at the C-PAC convention that it felt like he was watching an old movie, and that it was pretty clear that Mr. Trump left office under a cloud of, in his words, dishonor, and that if C-PAC and the few people who were in attendance is the best that he can do, then it shows how far he has fallen already. What's your reaction to that?
Well, begin with, you need to always, as you would in Nigeria, you need to consider the source. John Bolton was somebody that was fired by President Trump, and he was fired because he's a big advocate, and always has been, of what Trump calls the endless wars. Now, as a Trump supporter and a former official in the Republican Party, I question why Trump ever hired John Bolton. But clearly, John Bolton got us into the Iraq War. He was a cheerleader for America's intervention all over the globe, and Trump stands against that. So it's a mystery why he ever hired John Bolton as a national security advisor, but it's no mystery why if Bolton would be bitter about Trump. He was fired, and Trump withdrew substantially all the troops as a token for us in Afghanistan, and he began to wind down the war in Iraq. And both of those were sort of over John Bolton's body. And in terms of, I've been to C-PACs for 20 years. I've never seen such enthusiasm. They had to turn thousands of people away. So, and also received a national television audience. So no, when you get 75 million votes like Trump did, it can't be dismissed. John's wrong about that. I know him personally, but we disagree over that.
Right, okay, that's fair enough. And Mr. Trump did say that he will not be starting any new political party. A lot of people had speculated that he might start a new right-wing party. Will there be quite a few people in the Republican Party welcoming what he said, a sort of deep exhale of relief? Because if he started his own party, I mean, it would doom the Republicans electorally, wouldn't it?
Well, it would. I mean, I wish more Americans were familiar with the multi-party system you have in Nigeria. But it is, when you have a multi-party system, it's sort of a free-for-all. And the stability offered by the two-party system in America, where both parties are sort of institutions, is valuable. But as Trump said yesterday at the C-PAC conference, it would mean the Republicans it would divide the opposition to the Democrats and to their more socialist policies. So he said that is bound to be music to the ears of any Republican, because I would say easily 80%, maybe 90% of the party supports Trump. And for any one personality to have that kind of support in the first or second largest party in America, that's pretty substantial. So Trump is back. There's no doubt about it. And he's going to fight for clean elections. He had until the COVID epidemic, which he blames on China. He referred to COVID as the Chinese virus. Until that happened, America's economy was swinging away. And now, because of a lot of the deregulation, the Democrats basically support re-regulation. Trump supported deregulation, but even up until the time of COVID, deregulation policies. I had the chance to talk to his chief economic advisor at lunch, and they lifted 6 million Americans who were in dire poverty out of poverty. These open market policies of Trump. So I think Trump is back in full swing.
Well, we'll have to see how things evolve, but we're certainly enjoying talking with you, so we would appreciate if you stayed with us a bit longer, because we want to chat with you some more, Mr. Hines. You're watching the Arise interview, plenty more still ahead, as we continue our assessment of former President Donald Trump's speech and his attempts to reassert control over the Republican Party. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. So the Donald is back, and just in case you needed a reminder, it's all about the election which was stolen, how Joe Biden is a disaster, and how Democrats are a threat to the American way of life. And of course, it's no longer America first, but America last under the new administration. So will Mr. Trump be there to defeat the Democrats in 2024 and make a triumphant return? Well, the occasion for his most recent tumultuous political comeback after being silent for over a month was a Republican conference in Florida called C-PAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. One important message was that the Republican Party will continue to be his vehicle, so no third party, as has been mooted in the media. Why, Mr. Trump asks, would he risk splitting the right-wing US vote? Well, my first guest today has been watching the C-PAC proceedings in Florida closely. Richard T. Hines is president and CEO of RTH Consulting and was credited with playing a major role in helping Donald Trump secure victory in 2016. And Mr. Hines is still with me from Florida. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. Now, there was a poll of C-PAC delegates, and 32% of them said they do not want Donald Trump to run again for office in 2024. Do you think that is significant, that a third of the people who were there aren't that keen on him staying around?
Well, if that were true, it would be more significant, wouldn't it, if two-thirds of the delegates said they didn't want him to run. If I were running an election, and I've run in 4 and won 3, and two-thirds of the voters favored me, I would be very happy. So I think there was, my personal opinion is, if Trump runs again for president, he'll receive the nomination of the Republican Party. And the other point that he brought up is the members of the Republican Party that were not loyal to him. He is going to find opponents and run his loyalists against those what are called rhinos, Republicans in name only. They're Republicans in name, but they favor Democratic policies, such as open immigration and many other things, regulations that he opposes, all of that. So I think for the next 2 years, you're going to see Donald Trump very active. And should the Republicans gain control of the House once again, and the Senate, which could happen as early as next year, I think he's got his work cut out for him. I think he'll be on the road to resuming a presidential campaign.
Right. It's interesting, though, that you talk about the Republicans, the rhinos, who are Republican in name only, as if there is just one ideology or one perspective of Republicans. I mean, there are obviously people who are center-right, center-left. That's why they are all Republicans. I understand, though, that in spite of Mr. Trump's looming presence at that C-PAC gathering, that didn't stop some of the 2024 aspirants like Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri from giving it a go.
Well, you mentioned Senator Hawley. Senator Hawley is extremely popular. There's no doubt about it, especially on these social issues, which are very important in America. We've all heard of Karl Marx, but very few people pay attention to the communist ideologue Leon Trotsky. And this is the idea of destroying sexual identity, destroying the family values, destroying religious values. So Senator Hawley is the champion of the socially conservative wing of the party. But in my opinion, there's no doubt that should President Trump announce a re-election, that Senator Hawley would be supporting President Trump, not opposing him.
Well, I mean, to be honest, Mr. Hines, I always thought that the purpose of C-PAC was as a testing ground for future presidential bids. But I expect that instead of C-PAC, this time they got T-PAC. And I mean, that would have made things a bit more challenging for 2024 presidential hopefuls and would not have left much room for those who want to move past Donald Trump, which they're perfectly entitled to do.
Well, I need to congratulate you on something. You're a very astute observer of American politics. Your definition of C-PAC is right on the money. It's a sort of an audition for presidential candidates and even vice presidential candidates. But on the other hand, the fact that the C-PAC is still so warm to Trump, it was T-PAC. You're right. It was Trump-PAC. That's very clever and right on the money.
Well, I mean, given that, Mr. Hines, does it seem likely that there'll be any new voices stepping forward? Because, I mean, it seems like everyone in the Republican Party is trying to be as much like Donald Trump as they possibly can.
Well, I don't know that anybody can be like the Donald. You know, you consider his personality, love him or hate him, it'd be hard to imitate him. And but on the other hand, you've got people that will be. It's entirely up to him whether Trump actually runs in the end. Is totally up to him. But if he were not to run, I'm sure he would endorse a candidate that best mirrored his views, and he had confidence in the integrity that would pursue his America First agenda. And I would say C-PAC is a good place to audition for that.
So, I mean, here you are, Mr. Hines. You helped him win in 2016. I don't know whether you helped him lose in 2020, but I mean, are you one of those who wants to see him make another attempt in 2024, or is it time to clear the decks?
If Trump were to run in 2024, I would say yes. And at least one aspirant for the Republican nomination is from my state, a former governor, Nikki Haley. Trump would beat her 10-1 in my home state of South Carolina. And it is interesting, though, in passing, that how important my small state has become politically, because as you may know, the vote for Biden in the Democratic primary gave the nomination to Biden, and that was when Bernie Sanders began to go down and Biden rise. But it also was the turning point in 2016 when Donald Trump won the Republican presidential primary in my state, that he began to rise. So my state is well situated to profit politically from its importance within both parties.
Right. So in summary, and take your time in giving us this summary, because again, we appreciate your analysis here. Mr. Trump's speech was his chance to reassert his claims to the leadership of the Republican Party after his electoral defeat and the Capitol riot on January the 6th. Did he succeed in doing that convincingly, do you think?
Well, the answer is yes, he did, and he far exceeded my expectations. He spoke for an hour and a half. I don't think that's been mentioned, but everyone listening was just very, very committed to that agenda. So I think Trump is back, and what's more important, his agenda is back, which includes maintaining the free market economy that did so well under his administration, and maintaining the social values, religious values that he represented so well, the right to life, opposition to abortion, opposition to things like letting men compete in women's sports, which he really talked a lot about. That's not been emphasized in the news coverage, but he hit that very, very hard. We don't want to see the United States government embarked in social experimentation. That's not the job of the U.S. government.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard Hines. We really appreciate your analysis and your assessment. And Mr. Hines was talking to me there from Florida. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including a Nigerian in New York City who is a candidate for city council in the 21st District of Queens. Stay with us.